I am in conversation with Mr. Stefan Halusa, who is the Director General of the Indo-German Chamber of Commerce. There's a lot to talk about in terms of India's manufacturing aspirations, the technology tie-ups, the gaps that exist, and where all can Germany provide that perfect fit. Thank you so much, sir, for speaking to NDTV, speaking to me.
Thank you very much for having me.
My first question to you, sir, is that we are talking at a time when there's a great aspiration in India that manufacturing is a journey that we've been behind on, but we want to catch up on. And I think the best example of that is the semiconductor story. There's a lot of government effort, initiative, private investment, all sort of tying in. As someone who understands manufacturing story very well, how do you see this for India playing out?
I think when you look at the size of the economy and the growth of the economy, it is obvious that India is looking into semiconductor manufacturing locally. I mean, the dependency on outside sources is one of the topics, but still, I mean, the economy is growing and semiconductors is like the oil of the future. So it makes perfect sense to look into semiconductor manufacturing and also, of course, from a government side to support these investments, the initial investments, and of course afterwards operationally it has to be feasible. And I think when we look at the investments that need to be done, we have to look at the complete ecosystem. So it's not only the chip manufacturing, it's really the whole manufacturing system, the whole ecosystem, starting with components, raw materials, but also the equipment that is required for the chip manufacturer. It's important to get all of this here, I think, to be successful and competitive in the long run.
And where all do you see a direct fitment for Germany and German companies? Because this is an opportunity that's quite significant and also a goal that India has very clearly set itself out for.
I think the opportunities for German companies are huge, and not only in the space of semiconductor manufacturing. You can basically look at all kinds of manufacturing in India. And of course, there is this very clear drive for the increase of industrial employment in India, therefore the PLIs and now the PLEs as well. And this is a space where German companies are very active. I mean, we are a manufacturing country, and I think there's a lot of technology available, whether it is in automotive, whether it's machine tools, whether it's manufacturing equipment, whether it's renewable energy, medical technology. I could go on. And I think this is where the companies are looking at now and see what the potentials are. I mean, the forecasts for the next couple of years are very positive for the economic growth in India. And this is why there is such a huge interest across all sectors and also across all company sizes. So we're not only talking about the multinationals, we're also talking about SMEs looking at their potential in India.
And in terms of government policies, where do you think the perfect top 2 or 3 priorities that you would want for it to actually create the perfect ecosystem for manufacturing that India would want? What do you think should be those 3 priorities?
That's an interesting question. I probably should not try to give advice to the government of India in that regard. But when I look into
obvious gaps that you see.
No, the strategies of the companies. I mean, we're talking about supply chain diversification for many reasons, obviously, and many companies are looking at putting parts, at least, of their value chain into India. And what is important for the companies is that it is very easy, that the whole process is simple and smooth. The process of importing components or raw material, processing those components here, and then exporting them maybe to the next market or to their customers in the world. And it is important that we look at the complete process and make it simple also to import. And I think this is something that we would always encourage to look at, be it the elimination or the reduction of import duties, be it the reduction of technical barriers that exist. Harmonization of standards is very important, because if you have to develop and produce your products in accordance with different standards, that adds cost, that adds time, obviously, and that basically then has a negative impact on your competitiveness. So I think what we would like to look most at is that specific area, and that also includes topics like free trade agreements. Of course, from a German, from European angle, we would be very happy to see progress on the
FTA.
FTA that has been discussed for quite some time now.
And in terms of, these are important, policy areas that German companies want to be addressed. But the repeated, requests that keep coming, or repeated things that we keep hearing is about land, labor, those continue to be there. Of course, India is a federal structure. Some of it lands up on the state government's desk. But those are some repeated requests that keep coming. Do you think that that is a big area that hinders some of those big ticket manufacturing that India is very capable of unleashing?
I'm not sure about the big ticket investment manufacturing, but certainly for smaller companies, and again, I'm referring to SMEs that have an interest in manufacturing and setting up plants in India. For them, it is an obstacle because, I mean, you have to understand they're coming new to the market. They don't know the regulatory framework. And then if buying land is, or acquiring a piece of land for manufacturing is difficult, that will be an obstacle for them. So then, in addition to what I mentioned before, I think the acquisition of land is probably one of the topics that we hear most as an obstacle of settling down and building a plant in India. Yes.
Germany is an automobile hub. And then there is also this great push towards electric vehicles that's happening around the world. India is also trying to push the pedal on that. Where do you think collaboration on that particular aspect can be for India and Germany?
Yeah, it's as you said, this is something that is happening in both countries at the same time. And yet, when you look at the sales numbers just recently, you see that those are dropping again in terms of electric vehicles, and I think that is a concern. What I would be looking at is again there at standardization, harmonization of standards, because what we need for electric mobility to be competitive is volumes. The industry needs scale to be price competitive against combustion engines. And I think here, if we can come to a point that there will be harmonized standards between the two countries, that will improve the competitiveness, that will bring the prices down. And then again, I would looking at what I said before, tariffs would be one point to look at, just to make sure that, it's growing, that the market is growing, because that will help the companies more than anything else to bring down cost, and that will then, of course, increase sales, because then EVs will become more attractive.
We work in a global environment where there is a greater push to at least create China plus one supply chains. You can't eliminate China out of global supply chains, but the push is to create China plus one. There's an expectation India could be a big beneficiary of this movement, this sentiment. Where do you think execution of this, what do you think are those 2-3 areas where execution of this ambition lies, to translate this into actual achievement?
Yeah, I mean, we see it happening almost every day. It's not like companies are pulling out of China to go to alternative places. But what we see is that companies that are looking at investing into additional capacities in Asia or in their global production footprint, they are looking at India for sure. I mean, it is probably one of the most logical alternatives to China when it comes to the size of the market, the growth of the market, young population. So everybody is expecting growth to come, and that is again across all industry sectors, I would say. Where and those where Germany is already quite strong. So there's a lot of things.
So, but if
happening.
China plus one were to translate into actual gains for India, where do you see that happening the most? Which are those areas? Do you see that in semiconductor is of course a long gestation story, but do you see that happening in the electronic equipment space? Do you see that happening in the EV space? Do you see that happening in some of the other areas?
I would all the ones that you mentioned, semiconductors, definitely electronics and electronic components is a market where I see a lot of potential for India. Automotive, yes, and I think also pharmaceuticals and chemicals, if you look at it, because right now there's quite a substantial dependency on supplies out of China. And I think if we want to reduce this, and if India wants to reduce this, this would be one of the spaces that I would definitely look at for additional investments, and for that matter, then related to it to a certain degree, medical technology.
Okay. And also, when we talk about the trade tensions in China, I think EU has been facing a fair bit of trade tensions with China. There's been a lot of talk about tariffs and counter tariffs, and commentary around how Chinese trade practices are harmful for EU. Talk to us about what's the dynamics there, because trade is something that impacts every country. It's not insular. It's not just about EU China. Talk to us more about what's happening in terms of the EU China trade equation, because that I'm sure will have a direct impact on the EU India trade equation.
It will have. I mean, the latest decision was passed just as recent as end of last week, that there will be an import duty hike on electric vehicles coming from China. And I think that points into the direction that the EU will be very careful and will be watching this very closely, how and to which extent China is using subsidized capacities to export to other markets, and that will continue to happen. I mean, that was against the explicit wish of the German government, because specifically automotive is an important market for us.
Germany is an outlier, right, when it comes to EU's stronger position on China.
I think there are two things that come together. Germany, of course, has the largest trade exposure with China, so this is one in both directions. And then, of course, when you look at specifically automotive, the German car manufacturers and their suppliers are heavily invested in China, and therefore, of course, there's a great concern about what that kind of impact that could have on their operations. And at the same time, even more so, as you said it, that means we need to go somewhere else. And this is where India comes into the equation to be looked at as a future market. But the EU, of course, being somehow squeezed between the US and the China, and we all don't know what is going to happen after the elections.
I was going to come to just that.
I was afraid you would.
That when you talk about trade tensions, you cannot not talk about what's happening in the US. Just a couple of weeks left, and the commentary one gets is that economy is a very important issue. Both the Democrats and Republicans understand how important economy is, but they have different positions on it. I would say that Donald Trump's position at least is known. To that extent, Kamala Harris has not shown her, or has not told her independent economic view so far. But how do you read the uncertainty that may come in from the American political system?
And this is what I believe uncertainty hurts us most right now. And as you said it, of course, Mr. Trump has been explicit on his economic policies, like he was explicit in many other areas as well. But it is the uncertainty that hurts us most, because that's what investors, what companies are looking for. And if you have, if you don't know which directions we are going, if we don't know which new tariffs are going to be put up, in which directions, between whom, how is India reacting, how will the EU then finally react, that gives great uncertainty, and that's bad for the economy, because this basically means companies are not investing, consumers are not consuming. And this is, again, we always plead for this collaboration between EU and Germany and India, because I think together we would be much stronger, and we would be much less dependent on what is happening in other countries or in other parts of the world. And this is why it is so important for us that we built that platform like with the upcoming conference, Asia Pacific Conference, and I think that will also be a factor for the intergovernmental consultations between the Indian and the German government in 2.5 weeks' time.
Absolutely.
It's really, how can we facilitate that collaboration across all different sectors that are important for us to make both of us stronger?
Final question, sir. In terms of the global economy and the global headwinds, how optimistic are you that protectionist trends that are growing in many countries, in fact, one also hears that in India as well, how optimistic are you that these protectionist trends will not impact global trade? Or do you think one has to be a realist and political realities need to sort of be accepted for even for trade to flourish?
I'm an optimist. I'm a born optimist, but I'm afraid that for the next couple of years we have to be realistic. That we will see these barriers existing and probably getting even higher for a certain period of time. Because I don't see anywhere an initiative to change that. Right now, all
Yes.
we hear everywhere you mentioned is that, well, if the others protect their markets, we have to protect our markets as
Even
well.
more. I
And
hear
even
that. Yeah.
more,
Yes.
exactly. And I mean, we know what this, I mean, this is going to make products more expensive, and that leads to inflation. That of course is always has an impact, negative impact on economic growth. So again, there, the optimist comes in. I kind of hope that in the not too distant future, that again will prevail. That the governments will see and act to it. That actually what we need, not only for economic growth globally, but also to solve the problems that we have globally together. And because that no country can do that by itself, we need global collaboration. Whether it's climate change, climate crisis, whether it's I don't know, coming pandemics, and we just been to one, or the threat of coming pandemics. It's so obvious that it's not going to work on
One
different
country on
islands.
its own. Yeah.
Exactly. So again, but I'm afraid that for the next 2 or 3 years, we will not see that changing.
Yeah. Thank you so much, sir, for taking out the time and speaking to NDTV. We hope that the Indo-German collaboration that you mentioned leads us to that tech ladder that we want to climb and become the manufacturing powerhouse that we so aspire to. Thank you so much for speaking to NDTV.
It was a pleasure. Thank you very much.